You're now listening to the Boys in the Booth podcast with your hosts, Harper Cody, Chad Melbourne, and Casey Abrams. New episodes every Monday on Spotify and Apple Podcasts.
Good evening and welcome to episode 130 of the Boys in the Booth podcast. Cody, Abrams, and Melbourne back with you this week after Chad and Jonathan Kiriakou did that great Let Us Explain Toronto Maple Leafs off-season episode next week. We hope you enjoyed that one. And if you haven't checked it out yet, you can listen to it on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. So, guys, how we doing after the Colorado Avalanche win the Stanley Cup last night in Tampa Bay?
Doing pretty good, Harp. I'm a little exhausted right now because this summer's been busy as hell, like I've said the last couple of weeks, and it's just been go, 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 and not a lot of sleeping going on. So I'm pretty exhausted. I did, manage to stay awake past Colorado winning the Cup. That was exciting, but I mean, not too much going on there for a Devils fan.
Yeah, I'm a bit upset. I lost $50 because I had a nice bet on Tampa Bay to win the Cup. We all predicted Tampa Bay to win the Cup, and they just couldn't get it done. I thought for sure when Stamkos scored that opening goal on Kemper that they were just going to steamroll them that game and go back and win it in Colorado in Game 7, but no such thing happened. You got to tip your cap to Colorado, who just had an unbelievable postseason, like just incredible. I think they tied the league record for total wins in a season, if I'm getting that stat right. Season wins and postseason wins. Yeah, that's so in one encompassed season. So that's incredible. What a great team to watch. Like, we've kind of been saying this for a while that they were due to break through and get over the hump and get it done. And this was the year. And, even though I didn't pick them to win, I'm still happy for them. And, they'll be back next year, and so will Tampa Bay. So we could even see a similar final next year if both these teams just keep chugging. But this weekend for me was also good. You mentioned 2 weekends ago I did the episode with John Kiriakou, and that was super fun talking about the Maple Leafs. This past weekend, I went to my family visit. It was my mom's birthday. I got to see my little nephew Maverick all weekend. Went to the zoo and stuff. He's the cutest, handsomest little boy, and it was the best time. It was great seeing them. And just overall in a good mood. Paige gets back in a week, so I've got one more week of bachelor life. She's over in Europe right now. Things are going well.
Cool. Yeah, good weekend here in Brockville, boys. We had the Tall Ships Festival this past weekend, so there were a few thousand people down at Blockhouse, and got to do a little bit of announcing down there as well and see these really cool ships and actually get to go on one of them last night with Meg, so that was really cool. And it was a great weekend. And now just looking forward to the off-season craziness, and obviously that starts with the NHL Draft Round One on July 7th, from the Bell Center in Montreal. And of course, the Habs have the first pick. But before we move on to our draft preview stuff for this episode, again, congratulations to the Colorado Avalanche and all of our buddies who we know who are Avs fans, whether it's Chad Caskanet or Cole Pickup or Nick Servage, whoever. Congrats to those guys. They've been waiting for a while. Their third Stanley Cup in franchise history, and they're able to get it done. So again, congratulations to the Colorado Avalanche. All right, let's get into some draft preview. So we're going to go through a mock top 10 for the NHL draft in round one and sort of have a discussion of that. And we're going to focus on, obviously, team needs and which player suits which team the best as we go through our mock top 10. So starting at the top with the host team, the Montreal Canadiens, how perfect is this? Kent Hughes and company have the number one pick where the draft is held in Montreal, and I've got them taking Shane Wright of the Kingston Frontenacs. He's been the projected number 1 pick all year long. He goes to the host to set up a bright future down the middle with Wright and Suzuki in Montreal. So, guys, I've got Shane Wright going to the Montreal Canadiens. I think it's a great fit.
Yeah, that's who I have going there too. He's kind of the consensus 1 overall pick in this draft. There's always rumbles that someone else should go, like whether it be Logan Cooley or Slavkowski. Both those guys think they should be the first overall pick, and a lot of people are, mentioning that. Like even Laine was mentioning that he was going to go over Matthews at one point. It happens every single year, but I'm pretty sure we're all certain that Shane Wright will go to Montreal. And if he doesn't, I think there's going to be a lot of puzzled faces in the Bell Center, just like when they picked Kotkaniemi a few years ago. But exceptional status, CHL Rookie of the Year when he did come in, and he was the assistant captain right away and for the Frontenacs. I remember when I was working in Kingston for the radio, I was talking to a few guys with the Frontenacs, and they said it's unbelievable how much of a professional this guy is at 15 years old, 16 years old, 17 years old. He's just all pro already. And it's going to be a great pickup for Montreal. A little more size than what they're used to. Thank goodness for them. So I think it's going to be a good pick for them.
Yeah. So Case, you said we're all in agreement here that Shane Wright is going to go to Montreal. You don't think they're going to take Jack Hughes, number 1 overall?
It's the wrong Jack Hughes.
Yeah, it's the wrong Jack Hughes to go number 1. But yeah, so you're right. We're in agreement here. Shane Wright is the no-brainer number 1 pick. But I mean, if you look at past number 1 overall picks, like, you're not extremely excited to get Shane Wright. I mean, he's going to be a phenomenal player, but since his exceptional status year and his 16 year in the OHL, his numbers have kind of dipped a bit, and there's been a lack of that extremely high-end scoring in the OHL that you expect to see from a number 1 overall pick. But the player has extremely good hockey IQ. His shot is pretty good. He competes really hard. And like you said, Case, he's a professional. So in terms of the guy that you're getting, you couldn't ask for a better player, at number 1 overall.
I think it's a little unfair to talk about his production compared to other 1 overalls, considering not all of those guys had to miss a full year of hockey. And I'm sure that had a major impact on Shane Wright, as well as, the whole of the OHL. Like, all of those players took a beating from that. Like, that's just Rust City. So
totally. And at the same time, too, I don't think you can say the same about many first overall players, that they play a 200-foot game quite the way that Shane Wright does. So that's another thing he has going for him. He's an extremely talented player. But there was a survey in The Athletic, I forget who did it or who wrote about it, from anonymous NHL executives. And that's what one of the execs said. He said, Shane Wright's the consensus number 1, but you're not particularly excited to get him, especially when you look back at some previous first overall picks. But nonetheless, he's going to be an exceptional player, and Montreal is going to get a hell of a guy too.
Before we move on from him, I just want to do a little test here. I want to see what you guys think, because I was trying to do this. Who in the last, say 15 years, 20 years, who would you compare him to with other 1 overalls?
In terms of his play style or his ceiling, like potential?
Play style.
I'm not thinking of a number 1 overall pick, but I think Patrice Bergeron is a close comparison. A guy like that who plays both ends of the ice, Canadian guy, responsible in his own end, can score. Mm-hmm. That's who I think of when I think of Shane Wright.
Harp?
I'll go with a more recent one, and I've heard comparisons of the 2017 draft to this draft, and I'll say Nico Hischier.
Okay. For some reason, my brain goes instantly to John Tavares. I mean, Montreal can only hope that he's John Tavares, but I don't know, maybe it's because of the exceptional status or what it is, but he just, that similar build and similar makeup, and I don't know. That's where my mind goes instantly.
The leadership, the two-way play. I get that. That makes sense.
Yeah. No, good question for sure. All right, so that takes care of number one for the Montreal Canadiens. And yeah, if they go up to the podium and pick Shane Wright, that would not surprise many people. That would be the safe pick, and I think Habs fans all over would be happy with a future down the middle with Wright and Suzuki. Moving on to your New Jersey Devils case at number 2, if they still have this pick and they hang on to it on draft day. And I have them taking the big Slovakian winger, Uri Slavkowski, a powerful winger with some scoring touch, had a great season, full of experiences playing against some top men. And I have him going to the Devils. I think it makes a lot of sense. They're pretty deep down the middle. It looks like it's Hughes, Keisher, and Dawson Mercer, 1, 2, 3. And so I think Slavkowski fits right in as a pretty good winger that could slide in next to any one of those guys. So I've got Slavkowski going to the Devils at number 2. I think it'd be a great fit.
Yeah, I'm wearing all my Devils stuff right now because this, in the last few years, is the only time I can really cheer for them is the NHL draft. And I'm with you, Harp. I have Slavkowski going 2 overall to the Devils. I think it's the better fit for New Jersey. He had a massive year for him last year. He had silver medal in the Hlinka Gretzky, silver medal in the Liga with his pro team, Olympic MVP with most points and goals in the tournament, winning bronze for Slovakia, World Championship top 3 player, most points by a U20 and U18 player. And yeah, like I said, the Devils, they've got a lot of the Logan Cooleys. They've got a lot of center depth and undersized skillful players. Well, Slavkowski fits this major gap for New Jersey in size and goal scoring. Tom Fitzgerald has even said on record that, he made a statement saying he doesn't want too many of the same player. And for me, right away, that kind of cuts Logan Cooley out of the conversation. Now, something that you guys might find interesting, because you wouldn't be reading into this, is that on All About the Jersey, the Sports Nation website for New Jersey,
yep,
they have been talking about the fact that in a value aspect, maybe Logan Cooley is the best player to draft for the Devils because they've been so good in the last 3 years at developing those undersized players. They have a track record of developing Jack Hughes, Nico Hischier, Dawson Mercer, Jesper Bratt. So they know the formula there. They know what to do with a player like Logan Cooley. And, maybe you develop him and maybe that becomes a trade piece. Maybe one of the other guys become a trade piece because you get a Logan Cooley in return. So the value might be Logan Cooley, but I think the player that makes the most sense for the Devils, and honestly, he's a lock at top 3 for me in Slavkowski. So, I would be most happy if they trade the 2nd overall pick and then Slavkowski and then Cooley. That's my order of happiness here.
Yeah, well, there's a lot there, Case, and I think we're pretty much on the same page here. You guys both have Slavkowski at 2, and so do I. You might have been thinking that I was going to take Logan Cooley at number 2 here because what we talked about a few weeks ago, I wasn't the highest on Slavkowski, and to be honest, I'm still not sure what to think of this player or how to evaluate him. I know he's a big forward who can score goals and impressed at a couple tournaments late last year, but at the same time, I also know that he struggled in the Liga. And if we're looking at a number like NHLE, I know that number is not the end all be all, but his production in the Liga and how it translates to the NHL projected is far lower than a lot of other players in this top 10 that I have here. Like, for example, Shane Wright, his production in the OHL projects him to get about 76 points in the NHL next season. Slavkowski, on the other hand, 31, and that's one of the lowest of the top 10. Now, I think projections are one thing and actual play is another thing. There's a reason he's climbed up the leaderboard in terms of draft projections over the last few months, and it's because he's impressed on the international stage. But there is still a bit of a worry there for me, and that's why I'm not completely sold on Slavkowski at number 2. But that's where I have him because I agree, Case. I think it makes complete sense for the team. You've got your Logan Cooleys, you mentioned that. you need something different to add to that top 6. And if you keep the pick, I think Slavkowski slides in right away as an NHL-ready player. He certainly has the physique to do so. And he's able to do some damage in the top 6 with whether it's Hughes or Heischer or Bratt or whoever they put him next to. You know, I think it makes total sense for the team.
Yeah, so I'm going to refrain right now from talking about why I don't think Logan Cooley should be number 2, because I'll talk about that when I think he should be drafted. But I'll talk about Slavkowski more and his production in La Liga. 2 things that don't worry me about that is he's playing in the Liga. He's not playing in the USHL. Like that, the comparisons of those 2 leagues is just so far off on the spectrum. And yeah, it didn't go well, but I mean, I also think that the Olympics is better hockey than the Liga. So he did impress in that, although it's a low sample size, of course. But the thing that really I look at more is in his draft interview, someone asked, he said, "You're Slovakian. Why did you go to Finland to play?" And he said, "Well, I personally, and I think a lot of people agree on this," he said his weakness was foot speed. It was his speed. And he said, "I want to go to the Liga because they're faster league. They're one of the fastest league in Europe." He said, "I want to go to the Liga and work on my foot speed." So, I mean, that right there is already that's a character thing to me, that he knows his weakness. He wants to work on it. And he was out in Finland doing that, maybe not necessarily working on the scoring as much that he's had in the past. And then when he got to play internationally, that's when he was like, "Okay, it's time to light this shit up." And boy, did he do that. Yeah.
And like the thing is, he's grown over the year too. Like he's developed into a better player, but it's just hard for me to be completely sold on this guy at number 2 when looking at his production in the Liga compared to a guy like Joakim Kemmel, who had more points than him this year. His NHLE is around 60 for next year, and he's projected to go top 10 as well after a full season in the Liga. So there's a comparison there, but I still do think he's the best pick at number 2 for New Jersey, or frankly for most other teams who get that number 2 spot. So I think, you know, you mentioned him working on his foot speed. That's fantastic. I don't think it was a weakness, just something that he's not above average at. So that's great that wasn't identifying, you know, something he identified. I think his puck skills are some of the best in this draft. He has fantastic hands, and also he has a great shot too. So if this guy can kind of put it all together in the next couple of years, like I said, I think he's a great fit for New Jersey in their top 6.
Yeah. The last thing I'll say before we move on is, like most Devils fans, I am slightly worried about that pick because of the history of Pavel Zacha and how that turned out. I obviously love Pavel Zacha and I'm a big fan of his, but in his draft position, that size winger didn't really work out for us.
Mm-hmm. Different team now, though. Different team.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. Yes, we've seen that happen before, for sure. All right, moving on to the Arizona Coyotes picking at number 3. And guys, I got to tell you, I'm excited to talk about this pick for the Yotes. I feel really confident in my argument on why the Coyotes should take this player, because I think it addresses a glaring organizational need, and that is the need for a number 1 center in their organization. So I have the Coyotes picking Logan Cooley at number 3 overall. So again, going back to that need for a number 1 center, I think when they drafted Barrett Hayton a few years back, they envisioned him as being a number 1 center. What we saw this year from Hayton playing under Andre Tournier is that he is going to be a really good second or third line center that can play that 2-way game, kill some penalties, not put up a ton of points, but still be a very good secondary player in the middle for the Coyotes. So number 1 on Hayton, and then number 2, Nick Schmaltz, who started out his career as a centerman but had a huge year as a winger for the Coyotes. And so I think the plan will be to keep him on the wing. You have Keller on one side and Schmaltz on the other. And then this year, their first line center for a large chunk of the season was Travis Boyd. And that's obviously not a long-term fit for that organization. So I have Logan Cooley going at number 3 to the Coyotes. I think right there you identify that need as having a number 1 center that can play between wingers like Clayton Keller and Dylan Guenther for a very long time. I think Cooley to the Coyotes at 3 would be a home run for this organization as they can continue this tear-down rebuild. What do you guys think?
Well, Harper, we are 3 for 3 on the draft so far because I also have Logan Cooley going number 3. I think for me, the top 3 was set, and it was just which order am I going to put these guys in, and I have Cooley at number 3. A lot of, for the same reasons Chad kind of mentioned about Slavkowski, and that I don't really know how to evaluate players in the U.S. development program anymore. I really don't know what that means because it's kind of the stacked team in a weak league every single year. And his production is also just not as good as some of the players we've seen come out of the development program lately, i.e. Jack Hughes, or Beniers, or I don't know. There's a handful of them. Plus, yeah, exactly. Logan Cooley is probably going for that exact reason, and for his size will probably be in the NCAA for at least 1 to 2 years now. And that's a player that the Devils don't want to pick another player that they have to wait on. They need ready now, or they need to trade this pick, and that's why I have Logan Cooley slipped down to number 3. Although I've heard he might be the most talented player in this draft. He's got a ridiculous IQ. He's got maybe the best hands in the draft. And then on top of that, I've heard he's just as good two-way as Shane Wright. So, Arizona gets an absolute steal here at number 3. And this might be a player that I forever loathe in the league because I might ultimately wish the Devils had picked him.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about the hockey sense. You mentioned the skating too. Like all of that combined, I think makes Logan Cooley perhaps one of the most sought after prospects in this draft, and maybe even the best when it's all said and done. I think he has the highest ceiling in the draft. I don't think that's crazy to say, but we're talking about him at number 3 here because right now I think number 1 and 2, Shane Wright and Uri Slavkowski, have solidified themselves and they fit the team needs at 1 and 2. And then I think Logan Cooley at 3 is just the best player available. And if he lives up to his potential, like I said, could be the best player from this draft. But I guess we'll just have to see. There's a lot there. But yeah, I'm agreeing with you guys at Cooley at number 3. I just think it makes sense. He's the best player, and Arizona kind of needs everything. So why not take the best player available?
It's like this player is the best player available at 3, and he fits the team needs. So it's perfect. Arizona very happy with themselves right now.
Yeah. You know that the Coyotes would love to be at the top. They would love to pick Shane Wright. They would be very happy with that. And you know what? They pick Cooley at 3, and then they have a good chance at taking Connor Bedard at number 1 in 2023. So there you go. But Case, to your point, the Devils are in win now mode. They're looking to take the next step. So they take Slavkowski, slides into the lineup right away. There's a good chance of that, or they deal that pick. There's no rush for Arizona. They have teared this down to the studs, and they are going to take all the time in the world. So I think Cooley would be a great pick, and let him take all the time he needs to develop into that number 1 franchise center that they need.
Harp, when you teed this one up, the way you said it, like, I can really defend this point or whatever. I can really defend this guy. I have a good argument for the fact that he should go 3rd. I thought it was going to be someone else because Cooley is like the guy. I thought the way you set it up, it was like going to be a crazy pick. But no, that was the guy, and it's a good pick at 3.
No, it was definitely obvious at the same time, but I just mean it was more. I felt good about the argument as far as the organizational need for the Coyotes. So anyway, that's definitely. All right, moving on to number 4, the Seattle Kraken. They drafted 2nd overall last year, took centerman Matty Beniers from Michigan, of course, and now they're picking 2 spots later at number 4. And it was a rough season for the Kraken, but, the future certainly looks bright. They have a lot of picks, of course, after the trade deadline. And I have them taking the first defenseman off the board, and that is Simon Nemech. Another Slovakian goes in the top 5 offensive defenseman. So last year you take Matty Beniers as a building block, a forward. And this year, the Kraken take a defenseman as another building block for the future. So I have them taking Simon Nemech as the first defenseman to come off the board in the first round of the draft. What do you guys think?
Don't even know why I signed on to Skype, because I could have just let Harp do this thing for me, because I also have Nemech going to Seattle, and then he took my points. And I was going to say, the 2 things you really want to build up, especially as a new franchise, that's your centers and your defensemen. While they got Beniers last year, now they can get Nemech, the best defenseman available in this draft. Don't care what you say. Thank you very much. This guy had an incredible year last year, a great regular season, but then his playoffs, almost a point per game in the Slovakian league for his team. He just took such a major step. Right-handed defenseman, one of the most valuable things you can have in the league right now. It's like, of course you want to take this guy at this position. He's been playing pro since he was 16 years old, and he just gets better and better. And I was looking at NHL equivalency, just like you, Chad. And this guy is like, he has a better equivalency than Quinn Hughes at that age, and was compared to Victor Hedman. So I don't think you could go wrong there when you're looking at production. But he can also play defense. He's the best 2-way defenseman available in this draft. And for me, in my mind, that makes him the most valuable, period.
Yeah, and just like you guys, I've also got Nemech at number 4 here, going to Seattle, because this is a no-brainer. It just makes sense. Like you guys both said it, they already have an A prospect up front, and that's Matty Beniers. Why not get an A prospect on the back end and just build from there? It makes total sense to get, a guy at each position to build your franchise around, because they've only had one draft and the expansion draft. So they just haven't really had an opportunity to build up their pool. So I think it makes total sense to take Nemech. Now, I will say, Case, I was between him and Juracek, because they're both right-handed shot defensemen. They're both pretty good. They're both projected to go in the top 10. The only reason, I shouldn't say the only reason, but one of the driving reasons I took Nemech over Juracek for number 4 to Seattle, despite thinking that both players are really good, is the fact that Nemech is a better skater. I don't care what you say. Everything you read on Nemech just tells you that his IQ is really good and he's a fantastic skater. And that's not to take away from Juracek, but I think he might be a bit of a below average player, or skater rather. And you'd like to see how he kind of transitions and builds on his skating after getting that knee injury in the World Juniors. So that's something I would worry a bit about. Both defensemen are really good, but I'm in agreement with you guys. I'm going to go Nemech at number 4 to Seattle. Just makes sense.
When it comes to top pairing defensemen, the baseline has now been set by the league in Cale Makar, and that's exactly the player that you want now as your top pairing defenseman. Well, I think this guy's the guy you could compare most to Makar in his skating ability, his size, his puck play, the fact that he's such a 2-way guy. That's why I had him, for the same reason, higher than Juracek on the defenseman rankings.
Yeah.
Just as a side note, how great is this for Slovakian hockey to have Slavkowski and Nemech projected to go in the top 5? I love it.
Yeah, that's great.
No,
for sure. Well, I was saying that earlier today.
No, fantastic. All right, let's move on to that 5th pick, the Philadelphia Flyers, who were looking to be a lot better than they were last season. They have a new head coach in John Tortorella, and Chad, you mentioned him, but I have the Flyers taking David Juracek, the Czech defenseman, big defenseman. He's long. He's definitely got some filling out to do, but he's a big, long, rangy defenseman with a bomb from the point. And when I look at the Flyers blue line, Obviously, getting Ryan Ellis back healthy will be huge, but he's a veteran. There's questions about Travis Sanheim. He's been in trade rumors. And I think as an organization, they're not sure about Ivan Provorov right now. I think they expect more from him and kind of looked at him at one point as their not franchise defenseman, but their guy on the blue line. And there's some uncertainty around his future as well. So I think taking Juracek to solidify himself as their quote-unquote franchise defenseman potentially would be a great pick for the Philadelphia Flyers.
Mm-hmm. Well, this is the first pick. We have a little parody because I do not have Juracek at this pick. I have another guy that it seems like every year there's one of these guys that jumps up the draft rankings, kind of leading up to the draft, but then even more so on draft day. Like people still have them at 10 or 14, and then they jump up, and it's because of the unteachables. And this guy that I'm going to bring up, I've heard has the best unteachables in this draft. His draft interviews were the most impressive, is what the GMs are saying. And it's the things like his compete level and his professionalism and his locker room presence and the things that you just can't teach players. And for that reason, I have Cutter Gautier going at number 5 to the Philadelphia Flyers. He also has that speed and power that attracts the Flyers every year. Like, I'm sitting here trying to think, what are the needs of the Philadelphia Flyers? Well, it's everything. They've kind of really regressed in their prospect pool situation. And when you need everything, then you take the player, the type that is usually thought of with the team, and that's Cutter Gauthier for me.
Case, great pick. I knew that you were going to mention him as soon as you started talking about the unteachables, the intangibles, things like that. And yeah, you get a centerman there to replace Claude Giroux, who is no longer there, obviously. And so that's a great pick. I was kind of thinking along the same lines here when I picked number 5 for Philadelphia. I went with a different centerman, and I think he's the best player available in terms of forwards anyways at this pick. Not saying he necessarily fits the player profile that Philadelphia typically goes for, but I'm saying I think this is the best player available, the most talented, and I think they should pick him. So I'm putting him at number 5 because I think this is what they should do, and that's Matthew Savoy. Matthew Savoy had a fantastic year, and he has one of the highest NHL equivalency projections of this draft, at least in the top 10 that I've looked through. Above average skating, hockey IQ. His shot is pretty damn good too. I think he has everything that makes a really good player. He's just a bit undersized, and I don't know if Philadelphia is attracted to that, but I think, at number 5, if he's still on the board, I think it makes total sense to get a franchise center, or at least your team's best center, to replace Claude Giroux, who you had for so long.
The thing about Matthew Savoy, which is interesting, is it's kind of going against what I said in that he is a guy that's been dropping lately. But I think this is going to be a Matthew Barzal situation where the guy keeps dropping and dropping leading up to the draft, and then we're like, why the hell didn't Boston pick him with 3 first-round picks? Yeah. So I like the pick here. I don't know if I like it for Philadelphia or not, but I definitely like Savoy going higher than what the projections are having him right now, because for the longest time he was like a top 5 pick, and then he kind of fell right off the board now, like down to 14 or so. So it's a bold one, Chad.
Well, I mean, just looking at some here, Elite Prospects has Savoy at 9. Bob McKenzie has him at 4. Let's see where else. Sportsnet has him at 6. So I hear what you're saying. It is a bit off the board. Dauber Prospects has him at 7. Corey Pronman, where did he have him? At 4. Or sorry, Scott Wheeler had him at 4. So it's kind of, he's in the top 10, but you're right. He has been slipping over the last, month or so, 2 months, and Cutter Gauthier has been doing the complete opposite. Like, it seems like the question about Gauthier now is, how high can he really go? Like, because he's just been climbing seemingly exponentially, But yeah, I think both would make sense. I think the team fit, it makes sense to take Gauthier over Savoy, but I think overall, at least in my opinion, from what I've read, I think Savoy has the higher top end potential.
I do think it's funny that we both went with the intangibles pick. Like, that's the same conversation people have about Savoy. It's like, you know, he lacks size, but he has the intangibles. So it's like, I don't know. It's funny. We both went with that at the fifth pick, which is
finally we get some
we've
difference.
Seen it the last few drafts. Like, yeah.
No, great arguments by both of you. We'll move on to number 6 now, the Columbus Blue Jackets, as they continue to build things back up. And I have them taking Finnish winger Joakim Kemell. Surprise, surprise. Jarmo Kekalainen, Finnish GM, goes with his fellow countryman. This guy's a talented goal-scoring winger, and I think he would look great alongside a couple of talented centermen that the Blue Jackets have in their organization. Cole Sillinger, who we saw a lot sooner than expected and had a pretty good rookie season, and, of course, Kent Johnson, who has such a high ceiling. We got to see a small sample size of him with the Blue Jackets and looked pretty good for Team Canada at the World Championships as well. So I have the Finnish winger Kemell going to the Blue Jackets at 6.
In my mind's eye, I can see him playing for this team. I can't even explain to you what I mean there. I do think it's a great fit, but we're straying a little bit here, but I actually have David Juracek going to the Columbus Blue Jackets in this spot. I think that they're sitting and praying that a defenseman, one of the two right-handed defensemen, would slip to them. And while in my draft board it did, in a lot of people's draft board, not the case. I think that I'd be willing to say that if the two defensemen are drafted before Columbus will go with Kemell. That's where I can agree with you there, Harper. But I think Juracek, you know, he's that good of a defenseman, that right-handed defenseman. I think Columbus really needs some more, and they're already building good things on the back end with Werenski and Boqvist, and then they have Peak that I just love from coming out of absolute nowhere. He's great. So another defenseman in their system would be awesome. The one reason I actually have Juracek dropping a little bit was because of his bad knee. He had a surgery last year on the ligaments in his knee, and I've read that he has not looked the same since coming back from that. And for that reason, I could see him dropping even further on this list. But I do have a defenseman going to Columbus, although if these two right-handed defensemen aren't available, I'd agree with you, Harp, in Kemell.
Yeah, so Case, we're on the same page then. In when we look at Columbus, we see a clear need, and that's on D. I also have Juracek going at 6 to Columbus. I think it just makes sense. They've already got Kent Johnson up front and Cole Sillinger, Harp, like you mentioned. And, you know, they're still kind of trying to replace Seth Jones. I know we rag on Seth Jones, but, you know, that was a key piece that they lost. And I know they're a different team now, but it just makes sense to me, anyways, in my head for them to start replenishing the cupboards, you know, on defense. So Juracek, we've already talked a lot about him. Hope the knee injury and everything goes okay, because there is some concern about his skating, and there was some concern about his skating even before that injury. So, but yeah, right now I think at 6, if he's available, I don't think Columbus doesn't pick him. I think they for sure take Juracek at 6.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure if they wanted to do it, they could certainly trade up and grab one of those two defensemen if they really wanted to. And speaking of the back end in Columbus, they're another team that's been tied to Jacob Chychrun a little bit. So you guys are definitely right. There is an organizational need for a defenseman. But I kind of see... they look at Patrick Laine, scoring winger. I think, why not have another one of those and Joakim Kemell potentially. And I like that pick for Columbus as well. So let's go to the Ottawa Senators at number 7. And when talking about teams that could move their first round picks, obviously the Devils are the first that come to mind at number 2, but the Ottawa Senators are the other team, right, guys? Like, they are a team that is looking to take a step as an organization to be competitive, to compete for a playoff spot. They've got a good young core, just like the Devils do. But if they hang on to this number 7 pick, I actually have them taking Matthew Savoy. We talked about him a little bit earlier. Elite skill, fun to watch, and he would join an already young and talented core of forwards in Ottawa. So I've got Savoy going to the Ottawa Senators.
I think the Ottawa Senators are going to be a quick topic here, because I also have a player that's already picked going to Ottawa, and kind of continues on with what Harper was saying, and then me backing his pick is because I think Joakim Kemell is the next best player here, and I think he goes to Ottawa. Like you said, they don't need a defenseman, really. They've been picking, Lassie Thompson and Jake Sanderson, and they've Bernard Docker, and they've got a great prospect pool in the back end. But then you can say the same about forwards as well. So this team could kind of just pick the best player available, and I think that's Kemell here. He like all the reasons Harper said, he's probably got the best shot in the draft, or the second best shot in the draft, if you want to go there. Right winger, right-handed. It's kind of becoming more valuable once again. I don't know what's happening to us right-handed people. And Finns. Ottawa loves the Finns. So more coming their way.
Yeah, both of those make sense, guys. This pick for me, 7 for Ottawa, is a little bit off the board. Of the 6 rankings that I read to you earlier, he's only in the top 10 on 2 of them, 2 out of the 6. And this is Denton Matichuk, the defenseman out of Moose Jaw in the WHL. I think he's the 3rd best D-man in the league, or in the draft, sorry. And I somewhat disagree, Case, that they don't need a defenseman. I think they look at their D-core, and, I think Jake Sanderson is a pretty safe bet now to be at least a top 4 defenseman, but you've still got a lot of question marks. Like, we know Brandstrom isn't going to be the player that we thought he was going to be when they traded for him. And Bernard Docker, too, still yet to be proven. We don't really know how he's going to pan out in the NHL. So I think they look at this and they look at a player with an NHLE of 78, by the way, who's over a point per game in the WHL this season. And they say, look, if those other guys hit, the Lassie Thompsons, the Bernard Dockers, the Brandstroms, if they hit and we get another defenseman, sure, that's gravy. But I just feel like there might be some unease in the Ottawa organization right now in terms of how they feel about their depth on D. And if there's not, there should be, because that's how I feel. And I feel like, when you look around the league, that's how a lot of other teams feel about them too. Up front, I think they've got a ton of talent there. Tim Stützle has kind of turned into the player already that they thought he can be, and he's only getting better. They've kind of got a logjam of top 6 forwards, or at least middle 6 forwards. So I just don't know if there's a player who they can pick, who they think is better than getting another defenseman who can score and play big minutes. So to me, it makes sense. It might not to you guys. Ottawa's known for kind of going off the board and making these picks. So Matichuk to Ottawa at number 7 makes sense to me.
I'm not saying that they don't need a defenseman. I'm not saying I'm just saying they don't have a glaring need to me. I think you're undervaluing Jake Sanderson. I think he's a top 2 defenseman in the league for sure. I just think that they've got options in every position, and for that reason, they take the best player available. That was my reasoning. Yeah. If you think the best player available is a defenseman, then that's what they pick. But I think it's Kemell based off what I've heard about him. He's going to be pretty dynamic scoring threat, and I just don't think you can have too many of those.
Yeah, fair enough.
No, for sure. The other thing I'll say about the back end for the Senators is, to your point about Brandstrom, Chad, is that Brandstrom did come on towards the end of the season and did get a good opportunity to play in the top 4 with this team, and showed some of that potential that they've been waiting for. Obviously, not the player that they thought they were getting in the Mark Stone trade with Vegas, but Brandstrom did come on towards the end of the year, and will get a bridge deal, and we'll get another opportunity to prove himself. But with saying that, I could see them taking a defenseman, whether it's Matichuk or Minchkov as well from the Saginaw Spirit, whoever, Korchinski even, who I'm going to talk about in a few picks from now. But I could see that as well. All right, let's move on to number 8, and we have the Detroit Red Wings with this pick. And guys, I'm going to go with another connection for this one, and I have the Red Wings taking Frank Nazar. He's a smaller U.S.-born forward, and for me, this pick kind of goes with how Steve Yzerman drafted in Tampa Bay. All the scouting reports that I have read on this guy is he's relentless on the puck and brings a second effort every night. So when I read that, I thought about a couple of guys that Yzerman drafted in Tampa Bay, Braden Point and Anthony Cirelli. Relentless on the puck and always give a second effort. And so I think they take Nazar. Oh, and guess what? He's from Michigan, and Detroit have done that. They've done that before. They picked Dylan Larkin, a hometown boy. So surprise, surprise, another connection with this pick. But I think Nazar to Detroit would be not only a great pick for the organization, but would be a really cool storyline as well.
Hart, you picked Detroit's pick the same way I picked Detroit's pick, and that's based off Stevie Y and what he's done in the past, and also a connection, but different player. I'm going with Marco Kasper here. He played with Moritz Seider and another Rogel BK player in the SHL, and another guy that other people might think of passing on because of his production in the SHL last year, but these smart people will look at his high ceiling due to his high IQ and the intangibles that this player has. 6'2", 187 center. It's their biggest need in their prospect pool. And basically, I had Detroit, however the first 7 picks shut down, I had Detroit picking the next best center available, and I think that is Kasper, and that's why he's going there.
That's a good pick, and Harp, that was also a really good pick with Nazar. Mine is far less interesting at this point for number 8. Just looking at how my draft board fell, I've got Joachim Kemmel, who we've talked about already, just because he's the best player available at that spot if he slips that far. But I really like the Marco Kasper pick because that would be such a Stevie Y thing to do, wouldn't it? Like, take a guy who maybe you've seen more than some other GMs because of that connection with Seider, and just kind of go off the board, because Kasper's another guy. He's sort of polarizing. Like, you look at some lists, he's as low as mid-20s. You look at others and he cracks the top 10. So I think if you're looking at those polarizing guys who don't necessarily have the production but have the skill and maybe the mindset that you need, that could be a really interesting pick. So, and Harp, I really like the Nazar connection too in Michigan.
Who drafted Braden Point?
Well, Steve Yzerman.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Stevie
exactly.
Y. And that's a Marco Kasper situation to me. Sorry, Harp, just quickly, like you said, I mean, he only played 10 games with Moritz, but I think, Stevie Y has a connection to Rogel after being there so much, so he has seen him more. And then he took a big step late in the year. He had a higher minutes and impact to the game in the playoffs. He had 6 points in 13 games for his team in the SHL, so he did kind of step up there. And kind of the last thing I want to say about him is it seems like Austria every single year has one standout player, and that's another up-and-coming country that you're happy to see this for.
Absolutely. And I was just going to jump in and say that, Kasper, the way that he's been described by scouts and draft prospect experts, is that kind of the same as how I talked about Frank Nazar, relentless on the puck, just gives an honest effort every single night. And again, that comparison to Braden Point and some of those picks that Yzerman made during his time in Tampa. So I could totally see Kasper being picked by the Red Wings at 8. And regardless of who, Yeah.
We had the same mindset for this pick, Harper. We just went, a different player, but a similar player.
Regardless of who Detroit gets, like, it's going to be a good pick no matter what, right, guys? Like, it always is.
No kidding. Yeah. And Case, just looking at it now, like I mentioned that Casper is sort of off the board because on some lists, he's still as low as around 20. And I was thinking about this like a couple months ago when I was looking at draft rankings, like who's Toronto going to get in the mid-20s. Casper was a name that jumped out, but now there's not a chance he falls to 25. But he's in 3. He's in the top 10 of 3 of the 6 lists that I read earlier or that I've been looking at. So that could be a really good steal for Detroit. And I think they can make it work. And if any team's going to make it work, it's going to be them and Stevie Y. So I like that pick.
Absolutely. Yeah, good discussion on the Red Wings picking at number 8. And now to pick number 9 as we get close to rounding out the top 10. And it's my Buffalo Sabres picking at 9. And we talked about him earlier. He is a player that just continues to rise up the draft rankings. I don't know if he'll be in this spot, but I think it would be a great organizational need. We talked about him earlier. I have Cutter Gautier going to the Buffalo Sabres at number 9. And again, like I said, with the Arizona Coyotes earlier, I think it addresses a bit of an organizational need. I've seen a lot of chatter about Victor Olofsson not being back with the Sabres, just considering how he had such an up and down season, not really being an effective player 5-on-5, but still having that ability to score goals. Gauthier has the ability to score goals, and he's a big winger. How great would he look next to a Tage Thompson or a Dylan Cousins in Buffalo? So I love this pick if they could pick Gauthier, but I would totally understand and would not be surprised if he is not that late for the Sabres and they're able to grab someone else. But I would really like the Sabres to go with a winger. They did it with Jack Quinn. That looks like a good pick. JJ Peterka in the second round, same thing. So I think Gauthier would be great for the Sabres at number 9 if he's there.
If he's there, then I'm happy for you in Buffalo because I think that would be a great fit. But like I said, I see him going a little earlier than a lot of people think, and but it's totally possible he's still available at number 9 based off draft boards. I also have a winger going to Buffalo, mostly because I needed a little bit of help with Buffalo. I was like, what's a need, Harper? You said winger. I'm like, all right, I'm on it. And I have Jonathan Lekkerimäki. The Swedish 5'11", 172 winger. He's the second pure goal scorer I'm drafting on my board. And he's coming off a great year in the J20 National and the U18s, and then got some extended time in the SHL. So we've kind of seen what he can do, and it's shoot the puck and it's score goals. So I for the kind of same reasons as you've said about Buffalo, Harper, I have him going here.
Yeah, both good picks, guys. I'm going to go off the board for this one, and I've said that twice now, so I'm starting to think that mine will be the least accurate rankings here, or at least accurate on draft day. But like in my brain, to me, it just makes sense. So you're just going to have to come aboard and listen to this, okay? We talked about some of the best skaters in the draft. Okay, we mentioned Logan Cooley being one of the best skaters in the draft. Matichuk. I don't think I mentioned how good of a skater he is, but he's regarded as one of the best skaters in the draft. But by far, the number 1 skater in this draft. But like in this, you can't even argue this. Like every scout will tell you, depending on where they have him in their rankings, he's the number 1 skater, and that's Brad Lambert. And that's who I have at number 9 going to the Buffalo Sabres. And Harp, I knew you knew that. I knew you knew that.
Yes, I did.
So Brad Lambert is a completely polarizing player, obviously. He's been sliding down and down and down the draft rankings, similar to Atu Ratti last year, who ended up going to the Islanders, I think, at like late anyway, like late first round. But I think Lambert is just too good to pass on. And if he's still available at number 9, I think the Sabres have to take a swing on him because they're one of the only teams in this first round who can afford to, because they have the 16th pick. And if you take a player like Cutter Gautier at number 9, a Harp, like you said, I think that's the safer pick, but he's not going to be available at 16. And I don't think Brad Lambert will be either. So I feel like you just have to take a swing and get the guy with the highest potential. And for me, that's Lambert. They've already got a ton of players, who can play. And I think either of those guys would fit in nicely. But Brad Lambert, to me, I think he's just too talented to keep dropping. And I think any team who takes him and has the capability to develop him into the player that you see in his potential, then I think he could be a fantastic pick at number 9. What do you guys think about that?
I think he is going to be available at 16, and that's when Buffalo should pick him.
Yeah.
He has fallen, that's for sure.
Yeah.
The 3 years ago, we were talking about him rivaling Shane Wright about the first overall pick, and he's kind of fallen way off. And I think teams get caught up on that when they see this. So I'll be following him. That's for sure.
If he's available,
I've always
at
liked
16.
the player. Yeah, I've always liked the player, so I will be interested to see who picks him and how that works out for them.
If he's available at 16, that's a no-brainer for Buffalo. That's the most talented, one of the most talented players in the draft, for sure. The best skater. You have to take him. But I just wonder if a team between 10 and 15 sees the same thing I see and goes, "Listen, we just have to. We just got to take a chance."
Yeah, I think if there's a team that does it between 10 and 16, it's Vancouver. I think they're another team that could just take a swing at a wild card player and hope for him to light it up, because they need to do something like that, honestly.
Case, do you have the order in front of you?
Yeah.
What's the order?
10 is Anaheim, 11 San Jose, 12 is Columbus, which is another second pick. So it could be them. Then the Islanders, Winnipeg, Vancouver, then Buffalo.
So I could see Lambert going to the Islanders at 13. 13 is a Case, the Islanders pick?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Because the head coach with the Islanders is Lane Lambert, and that's Brad's uncle. And who did they take as a potential steal who really fell was Atu Ratty. So I could see the Islanders doing the same thing here and taking Brad Lambert.
You think they have two guys, though? You think they have two guys who are late picks? I guess Barzal, you're right, their Case. But how about to Columbus, Jarmo Kekalainen, Finnish connection there, Harp?
Yes, I already mentioned that earlier, but yes, I could see that for sure.
And
that
two picks in the first 15. Because what's Columbus at 12?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that furthers my point. I think if you're Buffalo, you got to take a swing on them at 9.
I like it, man. I do. But I also like your pick, Case, with Lekier Mackey. The only thing that I've seen that's kind of the issue or the question mark with him is his consistency to bring that consistent effort every single night. But it's another talented Swedish winger. And who did the Sabres take with their second first rounder last year? A player who they really liked, and that was Isaac Rosen out of Sweden. So I could certainly see them going that route as well. But Chad, I like the big swing idea with Lambert, man. No one has been up and down more than him in this draft class. And no question about it. He's a talented hockey player, and whichever organization gets him is going to get a good player. So I like the idea of Buffalo taking a big swing.
I'll say this too, because he played for the Pelicans in the Liga and got traded to where was it? JYP, and his production was abysmal, and it's been getting worse year over year, which is never a good sign. But you've got to think that there's other factors available, because you watch a clip of this guy and he's just explosive, and he can skate end to end, and it doesn't seem like he's afraid to go to the dirty areas of the net, because there's always someone who will say he's a perimeter player, and maybe that's a bit true, but in some clips that I've seen, he's going straight to the net. But I mean, there's a lot to like in the player, and I just think Buffalo has so many guys that they've picked over the last few years, and it's like, you've got sure things in your Cousins, and you've got Krebs now, and you mentioned Rosen and Peterka, and you've got Dahlin, who is established. Like, they've just got so many really good players, and it just makes sense to me to take a swing on a guy who could make all of them better up front.
Yeah.
Well, Craig Button has him at 42, and his word is law because he speaks louder than everyone. So
he does.
I don't even see him going in the first round anymore because Craig Button has him at 42.
He does speak louder than everyone, that's for sure.
The other guy I wonder about at number 9 for the Sabres is Jimmy Snuggerud. If you guys have seen him on previous lists, I wonder about him as well.
He's 8 on buttons.
Another U.S.-born forward. Anyway, that'll be a really interesting pick. No doubt about it. Great arguments by you two yet again. And now rounding out the top 10 with the Anaheim Ducks. So Pat Verbeek gets a shot at his first NHL draft with the Ducks. He sold off big time, getting assets at the deadline. And with this pick, I have the Ducks taking left shot defenseman Kevin Korchinski from Seattle, a strong skating left shot D, as I mentioned. I think there's a need there after Hampus Lindholm, excuse me, exited the organization at the deadline. And other than Jamie Drysdale, guys, if I'm wrong, please stop me, but I don't see a lot of depth in this organization on defense. So I think that picking Korchinski, or if Minchkov is there, we mentioned him earlier, or even Matichuk, your guy, Chad, just another defenseman to go alongside Jamie Drysdale to have just another guy for the future on the back end of the Anaheim Ducks. But I've got them taking Korchinski because I like the idea of having him on the left side, Drysdale on the right for the future of the back end of the Anaheim Ducks.
Well, isn't it interesting, Harper, that I am correcting you on the pronunciation of a player's name? Ooh. Isn't that interesting? Because I have one of the players you mentioned going to the Anaheim Ducks for the same reason, in that they need defensemen in their prospect pool, and that's Pavel Minchkov. That's the pronunciation. I watched a Saginaw Spirit broadcast to hear how they say it. Get fucking corrected, Harper. Jeez. But for all the same reasons, Harper, another defenseman in his prospect pool. I think he's the stereotypical offensive defenseman in this draft. He's a dwinger, really. Almost a point per game in the OHL, decent size and great skating. So I think that this is going to be the perfect lefty to pair with Drysdale on your power play. Wouldn't that be sweet? So for the same reason, Harper, I've got Minchkov going to Anaheim.
The organizational need, the organizational need that you guys both pointed out for Anaheim makes total sense. That being said, for Anaheim, on the way my draft board fell, I'm between two players, so you can slot in whichever one you think fits best. Frank Nazar, who we already talked about, and Cutter Gautier, who we also already talked about. Both U.S. development program players who I think would fit in really nicely with Trevor Zegras up front. Both can play down the middle. Nazar more than Gautier, but Gautier can do it as well. So I think that would just be a fit. It just depends, do they want the better skater in Nazar, or do they want the guy who can shoot the puck like a maniac and might have the best shot in the draft, and that's Cutter Gautier. So it just depends what they want for organizational need.
Yeah, I thought the same thing. I was having a hard time with this Anaheim one. I almost went with Connor Geeky for the same reason, but I think he'd pair well with McTavish.
Yeah.
So
yeah, true. Yeah, exactly.
It's a I mean, if Gautier is still available, that's a great pick for Anaheim. So I'm just high on the player.
Yeah.
No, and rightfully so. He's been one of those big risers in draft rankings, that's for sure. All right, guys. Well, that does it. That rounds out our mock top 10 for the first round of the 2022 NHL Entry Draft. Again, round one is on Thursday, July 7th. From the Bell Center in Montreal. The Habs have the number one pick, and we'll toss these up on our Instagram so that you all can take a look at it and give us
hold on. Can you guys send me those, please, so that I can get them in order? Okay,
yeah.
Good.
Yes, we sure will.
Something I want to sneak in here just before we wrap up is one player that's on my players kind of to watch list, and I think will be a sneaky little dark horse pick if someone grabs him in the first round, and that's Isaac Howard. That's my player to watch.
Choice.
You know, Howard was ranked by Corey Pronman as having the best hockey IQ in the draft, even above Shane Wright. That's how high Corey Pronman is on Howard.
Did not see that, but that kind of fits with how I think about the guy.
Yeah.
So
I was shocked when I saw that. There was an Athletic article that, like, from Pronman where he ranked the players based on, best skaters, best puck skills, best shot, best hockey sense, etc. And Howard was number one in hockey sense. So that blew my mind.
He has better production than Logan Cooley on the same team.
Yeah.
I don't know. I've seen him like late first round, and I think that he'd be an absolute steal in the top 15.
Yeah.
I've seen Howard as high as number 4 in draft rankings. I mean, that was a few months ago, but no question that the talent is there. That's a good name. All right, so we'll do the same then for you and I, Chad. So
sure.
Casey's got Howard as sort of a wild card pick, someone to watch. What about you? Who's that one guy for you?
Well, yeah, just looking at this case, another Athletic guy, Scott Wheeler, has Isaac Howard at 10th overall in his projections, so that makes sense.
So I thought when you said I'm looking at another Athletic guy, I was like, Chad, I think all these players are pretty athletic. It's like, what are you talking about?
Looking at Phil Kessel 2.0 at 10th overall. No, so Howard, like Scott Wheeler has Howard at 10th, but the guy that I'm watching, and like my Fabian Lysell this year, because you guys remember how high I was on him, whatever, and then he went to the Bruins, so now I hate him instinctively. But it's Brad Lambert, guys, and you knew that. So I hate to just reiterate the player, but I'd be lying if I said my number one player to watch is not Brad Lambert. So if he's available at 25 to the Maple Leafs, imagine what the Leafs development system could do with him. But I think he goes early, and I think Buffalo or Columbus, one of those two teams with 2 picks in the first 15 or the first 16, I suppose, should take a swing on him for sure.
I will go with someone kind of off the board, and I've seen him really go up and down the draft rankings throughout the year, and that is Nathan Gautier, the centerman from the Quebec Ramparts. Mm-hmm. I think would be a great second first-round pick for the Montreal Canadiens, but someone who I have seen, as high as 15, mid-20s, even early second round. So I'll go with Nathan Gautier.
Well, there's a few honorable mentions too. Like there's Miroshnichenko, who has Hodgkin's lymphoma, and then there's a few Russians too. That whole situation, we don't know where they're going to go. There's Connor Geekie, who I think, Case, you mentioned earlier as a potential guy to watch. There's a bunch of guys
at like 11.
Yeah, there's a bunch of guys who could make their way into the top 10 depending on circumstance, or if a team wants to take a swing on them. But yeah, I wouldn't be shocked if any of those guys made it.
Well, yeah, also remember the fact that we're absolutely baffled every year at some of these picks that happen. So
yeah,
like when we were baffled by Moritz Seider, and then 2 years later he's a Calder Trophy winner.
Yeah, watch the same thing happen with I'm drawing a blank right now. The Swedish defenseman in Detroit, who's going to play next year.
Oh,
Edvinsson.
Edvinsson.
Yes.
Watch the same thing happen with him.
Yeah.
Yeah, seriously. Speaking of defensemen, too, I do think that we're going to see a lot of good defensemen go later in the first round and into the second round. There are 3 guys in my mind that I can think of that fit the bill for that.
Yeah. Okay, is that it? We got our top 10. We banged it out.
That's it.
We're good.
Yep. So Chad, we'll send those to you, and like I said, we'll put them up on our Instagram and get your wonderful listener thoughts. And looking forward to the draft again. Round 1 kicks off on Thursday, July 7th, from the Bell Center in Montreal. Looking forward to it. And again, congratulations to the Colorado Avalanche, 2022 Stanley Cup champions. Great episode, boys. Great to be with you again this week. And thanks so much for listening. We'll chat with you again next week.
This has been another episode of Boys in the Booth with Harper Cody, Chad Melbourne, and Casey Abrams. New episodes every Monday on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Connect with the Boys in the Booth on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at Boys in the Booth. Visit boysinthebooth.com for show details, and don't forget, you can become a patron of the podcast for just $1 a month at www.patreon.com/boysinthebooth.